Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
the podcast where we should all over our books.
And welcome to episode 2. Today we're going to be discussing Pride and Prejudice Retellings. But first, I want to start the podcast by officially welcoming Kelly as our third co-host. Kelly, yay! Round of applause. Kelly, you were a guest on last week's episode, and now you're an official co-host. So I just have to ask, how did you do it? How did you rise to the top so quickly?
Well, money was involved. There was an exchange of baked goods.
Yes, I think it was a really underhanded deal where I said, you should be our third co-host, and you said, okay.
I'm pretty easy as it happens. You don't have to work that hard.
Oh, well, we're so excited to have you. It's going to be so much fun. So like I said, today we're going to be discussing Pride and Prejudice retellings. There are so many of them out there, and we have a lot of thoughts about them. But first, we're going to start how we start every episode and talk about what we're reading right now. So Kelly, let me start with you. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading the new E. Lockhart called Again Again. It comes out on June 2nd. And it is amazing. It's unlike anything she's written before. Her last 2 books have been kind of mysteries, and this one is, I don't want to say too much, but it's different, but it's really, really good. I will be recommending it next week. Spoiler.
But to who?
Everybody. Literally everybody.
I've never read an E. Lockhart, but I've heard you talk about this author before, and her work sounds really interesting.
I think you would actually really like this one. I've been thinking this whole time, like, wow, Julia needs to read this. I mean, also Rachel, but you know, it seems like something you would enjoy. Okay.
Rachel, what are you reading?
I am reading Writers and Lovers by Lily King.
Oh.
So it's her newest novel. It's the second book that I've read by her, and I really like it so far. I'm about a third of the way in, and it's sort of a coming of age type of thing. I mean, the main character is 31, so I kind of relate to her being kind of the same age, but she was a former golf prodigy, and she wanted to become a writer, so she's been working on this novel for like 6 years, and then all of a sudden her life kind of goes off track because her mother dies and she really has a hard time handling it. This is all in like the beginning, so I'm not really spoiling anything. And it's set in 1997, and it is so very 1997. Like her mean coworkers call her Casey Kasem because her first name is Casey. So, I mean, so far I have shed real tears reading this book and also laughed out loud. So it's pretty good so far. Not sure yet if I like it better or worse than the last book I read by her, which I'm not going to say what it is yet because that'll be a spoiler for the next segment, but
Oh, that sounds so good. I don't know if I'd want to return to 1997.
Well, and Julia, she lives in Boston, and you used to live in Boston.
I did used to live in Boston. Okay, I might have to.
Brookline and works in Harvard Square.
I used to live right there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I am reading. So I finished N.K. Jemisin's The 5th Season this week, and it was a 5-star read. It was so good. I will definitely be reading the rest of the books in the series, but I felt like I needed something completely different for my next book. I just needed something really light, a palate cleanser. So I picked up a book that Kelly actually loaned me probably a year ago that I just haven't gotten around to yet. And it is The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. Yes, this book is so fun. It is a YA book, and it's following a group of friends, specifically our main character, whose name is Mikey. And basically this book is like if you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and instead of following Buffy and her gang of supernatural friends. It's actually following all of the other kids in the school who are just in the background but don't have superpowers, and what are their lives like what's their day-to-day like, where their school is constantly being invaded by vampires and other magical beings, and they're just like, man, I just want to take my finals and not die. So he has, issues, like his parents are kind of awful. He likes this girl, and then his best friend is kind of a demigod. So he has a lot going on, but I'm about 70 pages in, and it's really fun so far. I really like it. It's definitely completely different than what I was reading before, but it's really fun. So that is The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness.
I'm so glad you're liking it.
Yeah, it was a good rec.
Quite in a bit of peak if you didn't.
So our next segment is, we love to talk about books and book news and anything exciting that's going on in the world of books. So Rachel, do you have anything you want to talk about book news?
Yes. So I just found this out, and I don't know how I'm so behind the times, but Ilhan Omar is coming out with a memoir, and actually comes out this Tuesday, May 26th, sorry, which is the day this podcast drops. So it's called This Is What America Looks Like, My Journey from Refugee to Congresswoman. And I'm really excited for this book. I live in an area with a really high amount of population from Somalia, refugees, and she's a Somalian refugee, so it's really going to be interesting, I think, to read her story. I think she lived in a refugee camp in Kenya for like 4 years when she was a kid. Oh. She moved here when she was 12. She didn't speak any English, and it's just definitely kind of follows her basically living her American dream. So I'm really excited about finding out what she wrote about.
That sounds so good. I feel like I would definitely read that. I wonder if she recorded the audiobook for it, because I would love to listen to her read it, if so.
That's a good question.
Cool. Kelly, do you have any book news?
I do. My friend Amy Fellner-Dominy is an author. She writes children's books like picture books and middle grade and young adult. And her picture book, Cookiesaurus Rex, won the Grand Canyon Reader Award, which basically all these school kids in Arizona voted, and they named hers the best picture book in the state, which is pretty fantastic, yes. I have not read Cookiesaurus Rex, but I have read her other books, her middle grade and her young adult, and she's just amazing. So if you were to say, would you believe that one of your friends is like the best writer of something in their state, I would be like, yes, and I would not be surprised. I mean, it is, but.
God, people ask me that all the time. Oh, that's great. And you had me at Cookiesaurus Rex. I love that title.
Yeah, it looks so cute. Yeah. And I feel like there's a video of her somewhere reading it. So I'll find that. I'll send that to you.
I love the idea of school children voting on their favorite books and it becoming like a prestigious prize. I think that is great.
I just imagine them debating in their little classrooms and maybe having some sort of little kid book national convention like the DNC.
That would be really funny.
That would be great.
They're caucusing for their favorite book.
Some like very like unintended dealings. It's like, well, okay, we'll go with this, but I'm telling you, for middle grade, it's got to be this, or I swear to God, no more Oreos for you. You are done.
Oh, elementary school is so political. No, that sounds great. I will definitely get that for my nephew. So my book news, so obviously we're all still social distancing, which is a good thing. And because of social distancing, BookCon and BEA, Book Expo America, were canceled this year, but they're still doing a lot of things online. So I'm really excited that there will be some really cool virtual events this year. And I just saw one that I wanted to tell people about. So there's one, it's this coming weekend. So Sunday, May 31st at 1 p.m. If you go to facebook.com/bookcon, there is a Voices of Korean American Authors panel. And it's featuring David Yoon, author of Frankly in Love, and Jenny Han and Mary H.K. Choi, author of Emergency Contact and Permanent Record. So there's just so many great authors on the panel, and I'm really excited to watch that one. So that is BookCon online, and you can find it on Facebook.
Wow.
Okay, so Rachel, do you want to introduce our next segment?
Sure. So the next segment is, you know what you should read. So this one is for both of you, because I stalked you on Goodreads and it didn't look like either of you had read this. So
Okay.
you know what you guys should read?
What?
Euphoria by Lily King.
Okay, I actually have read that one, and it's just not on Goodreads. I know. I think I read it before I was tracking enough on Goodreads, but that is a great recommendation for me. I really liked it a lot. I think a coworker gave me that for our Christmas Secret Santa one year, and it was a good gift.
Kelly, have you read it?
I did not, and also I literally just bought the other Lily King on your recommendation.
Oh, great.
Did you buy it just now after she was talking about it?
I don't want to discuss that.
Kelly, Rachel, tell Kelly what Euphoria is about.
Yes, so Euphoria is set in 1933, and it follows three young anthropologists who are studying the social habits of native culture in New Guinea. And one of them, the woman Nell Stone is the character's name, but she is based on a famous American anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who was alive from 1901 to 1978, and she really sort of paved the way in a lot of social anthropology. Yeah, she definitely also discovered a lot of how child rearing affects how people grow up. And anyway, the book follows these three anthropologists as they are studying this culture, and a lot of things happen. It's a really jam-packed book. It's very descriptive. It's also really immersive. I think the characters are very vivid. There's a lot of different themes: colonialism, feminism, I would say ethics and scientific research. You know, it also some trigger warnings for abuse and violence, but all in all, it's such a great read, and I recommend it. So Kelly, you should read it.
I think I will. It sounds amazing. So thank you.
Okay, I have a recommendation as well for both of you. So, you know what you should read?
What?
You should read Layover Land by Gabby Noon. Have either of you read this?
I have not, but you recommended it for me before, and I did buy it based on your recommendation, but I have not actually read it, which is the sentence I say most often.
Oh, I have that. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
You should get that tattooed somewhere, Kelly. So this book is really cute, and the reason I'm recommending it to both of you is that if The Good Place and The Afterlife of Holly Chase had a baby, it would be this book. So basically the main character, her name's Beatrice, or B, she dies in a car crash. She's 17 years old. She dies in a car crash, and she wakes up on an airplane, and basically she finds out that she's going to purgatory, and purgatory is an airport terminal, which as someone who travels a lot for her job, I can say is accurate. So she's not only in purgatory, but she finds out that she has been recruited to work as part of this memory squad team that is there to help people look at their past lives and understand what they did wrong or why they did what they did so that they can resolve those issues and move on. So it's kind of her job to get them to open up, which is she doesn't want to do it, but she ends up being really good at it. And then she also meets this boy who happens to be, and this is all in like the first 2 chapters, but he happens to be the boy who was in the other car that crashed and they both died. So she thinks it was his fault. And she's like, now I have to help this guy move on to heaven. What? So it's got a lot of fun things though. I mean, it sounds kind of heavy because it's about death, but it's actually just really a kind of a cute, funny book. Like one detail is everything they eat there is encased in Jell-O.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it's kind of gross, but it's also like, it's fine. Like so it's so purgatory. So I really enjoyed it. It's a really quick, fun read. So that's Layoverland by Gabby Noon.
Cool. That sounds so good. I really want to read that.
So I also have a recommendation for both of you, but in my defense, I didn't get to do this last week, so I thought a double recommendation would be fine. I didn't
okay
with what we were all doing.
We'll allow it.
So do you guys know what you should read?
What?
Well, you actually should know because I've been texting you a lot about it. Please respond to my texts. Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. It just came out. And it is, okay, so one of the things about me is that if it's an author I like, I will buy that book without knowing very much about it. So obviously, from the title and the cover, which is a picture of a young Hillary Clinton, it is about Hillary Rodham, but this is actually sort of alternative fiction. What would happen if she didn't marry Bill Clinton?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very interesting, and what I like about it is we see certain things that we know did happen, even though this is obviously a very different life. But you guys may not remember because you're a little younger than me, but in the 90s, actual Hillary Clinton made sort of a joking comment about how, she didn't want to stay home and bake cookies. She wanted to be a lawyer. And
right.
became a huge thing. And she says that in this book too, but in a different context. And it became this huge thing. And minor spoiler, but to atone, she basically, every time she goes on TV, has to do some sort of baking segment to prove that she is like any other person, not really slamming like women who can cook.
Wow.
But it's so fun and it's so good, and it has all these kind of really deep thoughts in sort of almost throwaway lines and paragraphs. And the one that really stuck with me is she's talking to an aide of hers, and the aide says it's almost like the subtext is becoming text. And that's kind of how I feel about the world today right now. And I know this isn't a political podcast, but it's almost like right now, the dog whistle politics of like sexism and racism, they're not even coaching it anymore. And so that really just kind of struck me and made me sit there for like several minutes and then text you guys and then sit there for several more minutes. And then I had to go back because I wanted to know what would happen. But it's so good. And I would recommend.
I'm definitely reading that.
Me too.
So good. And it's a lot more fun than I'm making it sound. It's not just like, it's not just heavy political stuff and like sadness and whatever.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Okay, you've got me. I'll read it.
I believe that.
So we are going to get to our Pride and Prejudice conversation soon, but first I want to give a shout out. We have a new segment on this podcast called Indie Bookstore Shout Out, where we pick a a bookstore of the week, basically. And we tell you about it and tell you how you can support them, because we love independent bookstores. I always try to go to an indie bookstore when I'm in a new city. And during quarantine, I've been trying to order from independent bookstores. So our bookstore of the week is Book and Bottle in St. Petersburg, Florida. And this bookstore is fantastic. I've been ordering some books from them for the past couple months while we've been in quarantine, and they've been great at recommending things to me as well. And this is a bookstore and wine bar, which is really exciting. And I can't wait to actually be able to go and visit. Funny story, they opened and then a few days later had to close because of COVID. So, right. So right after they opened, they had to shut their doors temporarily, but they're back open now, and they are doing everything right and maintaining social distancing and cleaning regularly. And they've been kind enough to give our listeners a discount code. So if you order from them, you can get free shipping. So if you want to order a book, not wine, they can't ship wine, unfortunately, but if you want to order a book from Book and Bottle, go to bookandbottlestpete.com and use the promo code whatyoushouldread at checkout. So that's bookandbottlestpete.com with promo code whatyoushouldread, and support local independent bookstores. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Pride and Prejudice retellings. And we are back, and today's episode is all about Pride and Prejudice retellings. Pride and Prejudice, it being one of our favorite books. And you know, I have to say, we have Bridget Jones, we have Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, we have Eligible, there's Pride by E.B. Zavoy. I could go on and on. There's the list of retellings is so long. So I guess I just want to start this conversation with a general question. Why do you two think there are so many retellings? Why is this a story that writers really want to return to, and what makes the world that Jane Austen created a world that writers really want to play in and live in?
Okay. Well, I think part of it is that one of the best tropes in romance novels, which, I mean, this is a very smart one, but, you know, romance novels, is enemies to love. It's definitely one of my favorites. And it's told so well, and it's so funny and so witty and just a charming place to be, that I think, you know, why wouldn't you want to retell that story?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is kind of a classic theme.
Absolutely. I think it's something that it's timeless. The story is timeless. And even though it's clearly set in a certain time period, I just think that it crosses the barriers of, you know, what stage of your life you're living in, what century you're living in. And I just think that it holds up.
It does. And I also feel like the character of Elizabeth Bennet is a character that so many of us relate to. She's just a very compelling, and she's surrounded by a lot of ridiculousness in the book, which I think is something that is fun to read. Are there just too many retellings though? I mean, do we need this many?
I mean, probably not, but I think the good thing with this is there is a retelling for everybody. And no matter what your taste is, there is at least one version of this story, or 5, that you will absolutely love. And ideally, hopefully, also, if you read Pride by E.B. Zavoy, then maybe if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, you might go check that out too.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. That's, you know, there's so many different genres and styles of books that are covered by the retellings that are out there right now. So you're right, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, and I feel as though Pride and Prejudice retellings fall into two different categories. There are the modern day retellings of the story, which is basically the same plot set in a modern time period or a different time period. So that would be Pride by E.B. Savoy or Bridget Jones's Diary or Eligible. Then the other genre or the other category of retellings would be Pride and Prejudice, but told from a different character's perspective, or or maybe a continuation of the story. So the other Bennet sister or Death Comes to Pemberley would be in that category. So I think that's interesting too, is that there's so many different ways that you can retell this story. So Rachel, what's a retelling that you've read? Let's go around and talk about ones that we've read and ones that we like, ones that we didn't like.
So I want to start off with one that I just read this past few days. It's called Gay Pride and Prejudice, and it definitely falls in that second category that you were talking about, where it's just it's Pride and Prejudice, the original, but with a twist. So it actually Jane Austen is credited as the first author of this, because it really takes word for word a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the descriptions from the original text, with just some of the internal monologues are a little bit different. Some of the dialogue is said by different characters, and the author who adapted it, her name is Kate Christie, and it is so funny. It's so good. A lot of the characters in it are the same but gay, and it's great. And I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was really thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I felt like I was reading Pride and Prejudice, just with a little bit of a twist. And Pride and Prejudice to me is like a warm blanket. It's comforting. So I enjoyed the experience.
That sounds really good. I want to ask more about it, but I don't want to be spoiled.
Right, yeah, it definitely could be spoilery. I mean, yeah, I feel like I don't want to give you anything, because I want you to read it and
Okay.
find out along the way.
Kelly, you're up.
Okay. We're doing like one and one and one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first one I read was Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe by Melissa de la Cruz, and it really did not work for me for a couple of different reasons. It's a modern retelling, but I think she tried to stick very much to Pride and Prejudice, and not all of that translates well. And also, it's a gender-swapped Pride and Prejudice, so we get it all from Darcy, and we are in her head, and Darcy's head is maybe not the best place to be, because she's kind of awful. She's really snobbish and judgmental about everything, and it's maybe not super fun.
Huh. Well, the character of Darcy, that's how he starts out. So
Right, but we're not in his head. We're seeing him through Elizabeth's eyes. And I don't know, like I don't really want to be 24/7 with somebody who's just like, everyone is beneath me. You and them. All
yeah. Especially because I don't think that the original character was that way without cause. You know, he had gone through something with his younger sister being imposed upon by Wickham, right? So I feel like that probably led him to distrust people in a lot of ways and maybe be a little bit more standoffish. So
this also is apparently a Hallmark movie, so it definitely could work better in that. No, like, that's not me being a jerk. It literally is.
Oh, okay.
You can watch it on the Hallmark Channel or like rent it somewhere. It is a Hallmark movie.
Okay.
I can see that being a Hallmark movie.
And it's probably very charming. I think Lacey should.
Okay. So I have a book that I just read, and I listened to the audiobook. And kind of the story behind this is, so there is a book that just came out called The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. And it's a retelling of the story, but from Mary's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I thought I was reading. But I was actually reading another book that is a retelling from Mary's perspective.
What?
And this book it's The Lost Sister, Mary Bennett's Pride and Prejudice, or The Forgotten Sister. I don't remember, but it's by Jennifer Painter. And it's a retelling from Mary Bennett's perspective. I should know the title because I just listened to it, but I really enjoyed it. This one came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was so good. It kind of answers the question of why is Mary Bennett the worst? Because she's so annoying in the book, but central to this story is really her relationship, or her lack of relationship, really, with her sisters or anyone in her family. She's really the odd one out. And it goes into why, you know, she's really socially awkward. Something happens. The story actually starts before Pride and Prejudice picks up, and it tells the story of a family that is letting Netherfield Park, a different family, not the Bingleys, and something happens with that family that affects Mary, and you can kind of see why she is the way she is, and she falls into what the author calls a melancholia. So she's got melancholy or depression. So it deals with mental health. It's just a really interesting look into why she is the way she is. And then as the book goes on and she grows up and becomes more self-assured, it's nice. Some nice things begin to happen to her. And I really enjoyed it. And the audiobook was really, really good. So that was The Forgotten Sister, not The Lost Sister, The Forgotten Sister by Jennifer Painter.
That sounds good.
It's good. Rachel?
Okay, so the next retelling I want to talk about is also one like Kelly's that I didn't hate it, but it just, I didn't think was the best, but it was Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James, and you had mentioned that earlier, Julia. I read this a couple of years ago, and it's not necessarily a full retelling, it is a continuation. And it's fun, don't get me wrong. So the concept is, it starts out with Mr. Denny from the first novel, Wickham's friend, is murdered. And Wickham is the prime suspect. And Mr. Darcy has to defend him as his, I forget what they're called. It's not solicitor. It's more like a county court judge type of a job or something like that. Back then, it's like if you had a you know, a manor with a village, like you were basically in charge of law there. So he has to go to London with him and defend him, even though he hates him.
Oh.
And Lydia is in fine form. She does a Mrs. Bennet and takes to her room and, you know, makes demands on everybody and doesn't really realize what's actually going on. It's enjoyable while at the same time pretty cheesy, but I kind of like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And there's new characters, and you know, it's a mystery. It's a murder mystery, so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I read that years ago, and I remember, I feel like I had the same feelings about it as you did. Not something I would want to reread over and over, like I do reread Pride and Prejudice over and over, but fun to revisit those characters in another setting.
Yeah. It's kind of like a cozy mystery. Like if you like cozy mysteries, I would definitely recommend picking it up because it's just it's a different take.
Cool. Okay, Kelly, what is your next retelling you want to talk about?
The only other one I have is, then I thought, okay, well, I know I like Bridget Jones. So I reread that, and I've seen the movie probably at least 5 or 6 times. This was the second time I've read the book, and the movie is a great Pride and Prejudice retelling. The book is not at all, because it is a totally different thing. And spoilers, I guess, although the book is very old, not super old, I guess, but you know, it's old enough that if you wanted to read it, you probably already have. But the part where they're at the turkey curry buffet, very towards the beginning of the movie, and she hears him insulting her and her family, it doesn't actually happen. It is not in the book at all. And it's this whole completely different thing. Like when Bridget's mom leaves her, you know, her husband, she takes up with this other guy, they defraud some people. It's a completely different thing and not Pride and Prejudice at all. But it's super fun anyway, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend, now that I've told you pretty much everything. But Bridget's also a lot more together in the book than she is in the movie. So super, not Pride and Prejudice, failing all over the place.
It's so funny because I feel like Bridget Jones is one of the more well-known retellings. It's pretty famous as a story, as a movie and a book. And I never think of it when I think of Pride and Prejudice retellings. When you brought it up, Kelly, I said, oh yeah, that is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. But now listening to you, it's not as close of a retelling as you might think if you just watched the movie.
And it's so weird that they did that with the movie, and I'm glad they did, because I love the movie. I think it's pretty close to perfect, but oh man, I was reading the book and I'm like, wait, where's all this stuff that I know, and what is this here? Yeah. So maybe not if you want a faithful adaptation, or really any sort of adaptation, but if you want a very entertaining book with a character that you love who is nothing at all like that character you love, I would recommend. Okay.
So my next retelling is Unmarriageable by Sanaya Kamal. And this is a modern day retelling, and it's told from a different cultural perspective, which I really enjoyed. We've already mentioned Pride by E.B. Zavoy, which I would also recommend. But this one is set in Pakistan at the turn of the 21st century, so early 2000s. And why I think this one works really well, and I really did enjoy it, is the stakes in this book are similar to the stakes in Pride and Prejudice, even though it's in modern day. And sometimes I think modern day retellings don't work as well because I don't feel like the stakes are that high. You know, it's not necessary for women to get married the way it was in Regency England, where they were feeling like, I'm going to be destitute if I don't find myself a husband. But in modern day Pakistan, or in the early 2000s, you know, there is this discussion in the book about expectations of women, and that is to get married. And there are discussions about class and religion, and it does feel like the stakes are high, and the main character is still able to resist these expectations that are put upon her, which I feel like makes her a really strong character and similar to Elizabeth Bennet. And there's also a really interesting discussion about colonialism and colonization. And, you know, she's an English teacher, and she teaches her students about Pride and Prejudice, but there's a conversation about, should we be teaching British writers when they conquered us? Wow. You know, there's this really interesting conversation about that. And I really liked it, even though it is a very close retelling. I mean, the beats are exactly the same as Pride and Prejudice. So to me, that was nice because you know the story, and then you can kind of learn more about the culture and the time and you know what is going on in that part of the world. And so I highly recommend that. And that's Unmarriageable by Sanaya Kamal.
That sounds so good. I really want to read that.
Mm-hmm. You should. Does anyone else have any other retellings that they want to talk about? I do want to also mention this series that I read years and years ago. It's called Fitzwilliam Darcy, Gentleman. It's okay. I read this so long ago, so I don't remember all the details, but it's a 3-book series, and it starts with a book called An Assembly Such as This. And it is basically Pride and Prejudice from Darcy's perspective. And it's by Pamela Aden. And she basically takes books to tell the whole story from his perspective. So she really goes into detail. And I just remember it was a series that got me back into reading when I had sort of finished up grad school and wasn't reading for fun anymore. And then I picked up this series and just tore through it. So it's definitely like book candy. You know, it's just a fun read. There's a character named Fletcher, who's his valet, who's really funny and a new character. And I love their interactions and their dynamics. So I would recommend Fitzwilliam Darcy, Gentleman, a series by Pamela Aiden.
I definitely want to read that. I had no idea that existed.
Yep.
And I really want to read it. And that makes me think of there's other Pride and Prejudice retellings that I haven't read that I really want to. I have a couple that I can think of off the top of my head. One being Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is kind of a famous retelling, and I've never read it. Oh, you have it.
You can borrow it.
Okay.
It is fun. It is just Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
Oh my gosh.
It's great.
And then there's one, I don't know if this is the exact title, but I think it's called Longbourn, and it's from the perspectives of the servants at Longbourn.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. It's like an upstairs downstairs theme.
Yes.
I've never read it, but it's on my list too.
Yeah, I want to read
Joe
that.
Baker. Joe Baker, I think, is the author.
Okay. And then there's one that is a modern day retelling. I think it just came out last year. It's called Aisha at Last.
Oh.
And I think the Elizabeth Bennet character, Aisha, is Muslim. Let me look it up really quick. It's on my to-read list on Goodreads.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Curtis Sittenfeld's Eligible.
Oh, we didn't know, which is a great. It's also
I haven't read it yet.
Oh, see, Kelly, you should read that.
I know.
You know what you should read?
Every single book you've bought and not read, Kelly.
I have it, Kelly, if you want to borrow it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please. God only knows when I mean, I have it. I just haven't read it.
It's a nice, I mean, it's Curtis Sittenfeld, and so it's got that element of, it does cover some, like, you know, serious topic, but it's also a lot of light and fluffy, fun stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the same how you described Rodham. It's got both. So I really liked Eligible, and of course, it has the reality dating show aspect too.
Oh yes, I forgot about that.
Bachelor.
Aisha at Last. What's the author of that one?
The author is Uzma Jalaluddin.
Uh-huh.
So it's a modern day Muslim Pride and Prejudice for a new generation of love. Aisha Shamsi has a lot going on. Her dreams of being a poet have been set aside for a teaching job so she can pay off her debts to her wealthy uncle. Sounds about right.
Uh-huh.
And then she meets Khalid, who is just as smart and handsome as he is conservative and judgmental. So she is irritatingly attracted to someone who looks down on her choices and who dresses like he belongs in the 7th century. That sounds great.
That sounds cute. I would pick that up for sure. Are there any retellings that we would like that don't exist? Like a character's perspective? Maybe they do exist and we just don't know about them.
I would like to see something in like medieval times.
Ooh.
Because a lot of retellings are, like you said, they're either set in the same time period or in modern day. But I've never really heard of one being set in like prior to the 17th century.
Yeah, that's a good point. Having it in a different time period, maybe even before Regency England.
Right.
You could do a sci-fi futuristic Pride. I'm sure there is one.
I think
There
there's
has to be.
There has to be.
Probably like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one that came out this year. I feel like there's always 3 or 4 that come out every year, but there was one this year that I didn't love as much as I wanted to. It's called The Clergyman's Wife, and it's from the perspective of Charlotte Lucas
Oh,
after she marries Mr. Collins.
interesting.
And
it's not existing.
it was fine. It wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't grab me. I thought The Forgotten Sister, the Mary Bennett retelling that I read, was so much more compelling because the character was struggling with so much more than just romantic. In Charlotte Lucas's case, she's just bored and lonely, and she doesn't really like her husband. So she meets this other guy, and it's exciting, but it's also like, it's fine. But yeah, I feel like there are already so many. I don't know if there's a character or an aspect of it that I feel really needs to be delved into, but maybe someone will surprise me.
I mean, I think if it's told well, there's always room for another one. But I feel like how when people retell Shakespeare, it's pretty much always Romeo and Juliet, or now a lot of Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of Pride and Prejudice, we could get a Sense and Sensibility.
Yes.
Yes.
Or Persuasion. I love Persuasion.
I read a really good Persuasion retelling, but I don't remember what it's called or who the author is.
I'll look it up. Huh.
Persuasion retelling, no other details.
Emma would be a good retelling. Clueless did it so well, but
right.
It would be fun to have a book version retelling of Emma in a modern time period.
Yeah, that's really good. That would be fun if you put that on like reality show dating, but Emma.
Oh yes.
Idea trademarked 2020.
Oh, there was this reality show that was really a long time ago that was really weird. It was called Regency House Party. It was basically the people had to live like they were in a Jane Austen novel. So all the women, yeah, you have to look it up. It's probably on YouTube. It's called Regency House Party. I loved it. And all the women are just sitting around bored out of their minds all day. And the men go off hunting and have to wear these stiff clothes. It's funny. It's really funny.
That sounds great.
Okay, well, we have talked about Pride and Prejudice. Any other thoughts about Pride and Prejudice or the retellings? Pride and Prejudice, it's one of my favorite books of all time. So I will always read a retelling.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, if listeners out there have not read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, please do so immediately.
Major spoilers for Pride and Prejudice, we should have said.
And also watch the BBC miniseries adaptation instead of the Keira Knightley adaptation. I'm just kidding, both good. But the BBC miniseries with Jennifer L. and Colin Firth is the best thing ever made. So,
one of my Facebook friends likes the Keira Knightley version more, which, I mean, I don't want to be a jerk about it, but I'm like, really? Why?
They're wrong. They're just wrong.
I mean, yeah.
You're not being a jerk, you're just being honest. Jennifer Ellie and Colin Firth are amazing.
I mean, it's every reader's dream to have a book to movie or book to screen adaptation that is word for word the same as the book, pretty much. I mean, there were like 2 scenes maybe that were altered a little bit for the adaptation, but what is it? 6 or more hours?
Oh, yes. It's so good.
Even more than that. I think it's 6 episodes, an hour and a half each. It is so much content.
I might watch it tonight. Now that we're talking about it, I love it so much.
Same.
Okay, well, this was super fun, and this has been the What You Should Read podcast. So you can find us at whatyoushouldread.com, and on social media, we are WYSR_podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Find us on YouTube, and let us know if you have a Pride and Prejudice retelling that you love that we should read. And, I think we should ask our listeners to solicit us for recommendations for what you should read segment.
Absolutely. They can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. And I also follow us on Goodreads.
Yes.
because I'm making a bookshelf for every episode. So like episode 1 has every book we talked about. And so episode 2, I'll add to the bookshelf on the day this comes out, I'll add every book we talked about to that bookshelf. So that way, if you want to find something we talked about, you can just go to our Goodreads page.
That's great. Yeah. So email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. Tell us what you like to read, or if there's a type of book that you're looking to read, and we will tell you, what you should read and try to come up with a good suggestion. Okay.
And super fast, if one of us wants to buy, I don't know, Euphoria by Lily King that was recommended to one of us this very day, what was that promo code again?
That was, yes. So you can go to bookandbottlestpete.com, and the promo code is what you should read, and you will get free shipping. So shout out to Tara, my former colleague, who now owns and operates her own bookstore/wine bar. It's super cool. I can't wait to see it. It looks beautiful in the photos. So yeah, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.